Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to A Theologica with yours truly, Derek Bennett, on this fine Sunday afternoon. Today, and today only, I have with us Jonathan M.S. Pearce and Aaron Adair, authors of Aliens and Religion, Where Two Worlds Collide, assessing the impact of discovering extraterrestrial intelligence on religion and theology. I cannot think of a topic that is more just bursting with absolute boredom. Who cares? This is not even remotely fascinating. This is a snooze fest right here. It's a real dud, and I'm sorry. I do my best, but my best isn't good enough, as you can see. I mean, what an just. I try to bring you titillating topics and material. All I've got is aliens. I'm sorry. That's all I can do. Now, this is going to be fun. This is really, truly a fascinating topic, and I'm excited for this. And co-hosting with me today, hold your applause, I know you're friggin' excited, is none other than the legendary Apostacie.
I did not know when you were going to bring me on, so I was mid-laugh, not knowing what you were going to say. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how are you? Let's pretend like we weren't already talking before this broadcast.
Oh, great. It's so great to see you, Derek.
Yeah, it's really good to see you
really
too.
Good to see you. Yes.
Yay! Really, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm so excited to be here again on your channel and talking about this topic with these two wonderful people that I've just got to meet. So, yeah, thank you.
I wish you had a more sweet and innocent vibe. Because what you're doing right now isn't working for me. It's not working. You're bringing us down. It's no good.
I'm so sorry. There I say sorry.
What is that about, eh?
I don't know.
Oh, Lord. Well, let's go ahead and bring on our guests. Are you down for that? Are you?
Yeah, of course.
Don't mess with people. That's not nice. What's the matter with you?
I'm on your show, so yeah, I kind of gotta.
Let's talk about aliens. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yes,
let's do it.
Let's do it.
Ladies and gents, Mr. Aaron Adair and Mr. Jonathan Pearce.
Yay.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm a little bit late to this. I was just coming back. I've only just got back from the World Cup titillation competition. And it turns out that, you were saying that this wasn't titillating enough. I have got the medals to go with my titillation, so stand by, everyone, to be thoroughly titillated.
Oh no, I got you beat, John. I just downloaded for our audio book pleasure the reading of U.S. tax code depreciation values for various monetary instruments. Don't worry, I will give you chapter and verse, every paragraph in excruciating wonderful detail, so that way come next April everyone can do their taxes and or fall asleep.
This is so our own authorship here is like Jekyll and Hyde, like you, Derek, to Stacie as well. Like both of you are Jekyll and Hyde there, but we're likewise. I'm Mr. Awesome. Titillation. He's Mr. Tax and Science.
There you go.
Everyone that was watching before you spoke, Aaron, left the show. They're all gone. There's no one watching now.
Oh, good. So it's just us. Now I can actually cut loose. Okay.
Thing that Jonathan said, you wrecked it.
All right. Well, now I can really say what I really think. Now, John, here it comes.
Oh my goodness.
So what's going on here? Did you guys write a book or something?
We did. So the history of this is I wrote a feature piece for Only Sky about the impact of discovery of intelligent alien life on theology. I can't remember exactly why. I think I came across a paper by McNabb and McIntosh that looked at 6 areas of the effect on Christian theology in particular and Christian religion and thought. And I wrote a piece looking at that a little bit critically. And Aaron came along, read that, and thought, "Hey, this looks like a good topic. We could do this." And so we did this, and here it is, and it's pretty exciting. Really excited about the book. It is a beautiful book, and it's had loads of plaudits, like the endorsements. Stephen J. Dick, who's NASA astrobiologist, one of the foremost in the field, says that this is an awesome book. Basically, I'm paraphrasing.
He did that because he felt sorry for you, but go on.
Oh, quick question, quick clarification, John. Not that he's an astrobiologist. He was the chief NASA historian.
Yeah.
and basically has done like the definitive work on the history of people looking for aliens or theorizing about aliens from antiquity to the early modern period.
Wow.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah. So he's a NASA historian, but he's written books, edited books on astrobiology, or including astrobiology and astrotheology as well. A little bit on that. And then Richard Carrier is saying this is the definitive book on the subject. So, if someone says it's a definitive book on the subject, we've got to go, yeah, thanks for that. Awesome.
I've gotten props from Richard Carrier before, and he does not give them out like candy. He doesn't. So when you get him, it's like, ooh, I'm walking on sunshine, right?
Yeah, and in fact, Aaron's previous book, Star of Bethlehem: A Skeptical View, he said he was one that said that's a definitive book on that subject as well. So Aaron's just definitive.
You're just.
I should mention, stay tuned, because I plan on an even more definitive version of that. But the manuscript I'm producing is scary. But that's a future topic. Interesting enough, what I'm working on there has more aliens and more Soviet propaganda.
Nice.
More aliens and what kind of propaganda?
Soviet
propaganda?
Soviet. Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that the Ruskies actually came in and made the search for the Star of Bethlehem even more complicated.
Really? Because I've been watching a lot of Fox News, and the more I get into it, the bigger fan I become of Putin. I mean, these guys are great. They're doing great work out there. This is God's work is what they're doing. It's good stuff.
They think they're doing God's work.
I have a YouTube channel dedicated to the Ukraine war, and I'd love to interview you. But there you go.
We should do that. So, guys, let's get into this. I wanted to ask you, the beginning of your book really digs into this brilliantly, which it had to have been Aaron that wrote it, this part. What is the likelihood that extraterrestrial intelligence exists? If you can touch on that and maybe bring into the discussion the Drake equation and explain that to folks as well.
I will try. So, what is the probability that aliens exist? 7? Okay. Any numbers that we come up with that we're going to work with, we have to have some theoretical sense of how to do it, and then how do we actually choose the numbers that ultimately go into our equation grinding. So the idea of trying to approximate how many current advanced civilizations are in the Milky Way galaxy right now is something you can't just go out and do a survey. We don't have rockets that can go to every single planet, count up how many of them have advanced civilizations, come back and report this. The universe, the galaxy, even our local section of the galaxy is just too damn big to do this. So how can we make reasonable approximations? So the radio astronomer Frank Drake, back in the early 1960s, found a way of saying, hey, let's break it down into these small little components, each of which should contribute to overall how many advanced life forms are out there. And if we have reasonable estimates for those numbers, we can say, at least as a reasonable guess, how many there would be. So the number he's looking for, N, is the number of current advanced civilizations. And by advanced, specifically, he's looking for those who can actually communicate over interstellar distances. Frank Drake was a radio astronomer, so he was thinking, in particular, hey, radio is a great way of sending things at the cosmic speed limit from one edge of the universe to the other if you're loud enough in terms of your antennas. So there's some bias there, but on the other hand, using light is probably the best way of communicating. It's super fast, and it's easy to produce. By easy, I mean we humans have been doing it since the late 19th, early 20th century. So advanced species could almost certainly do it. So what he likes to break down is thinking, okay, it probably has something to do with how many stars are forming, because the more stars you got, the more opportunities for star systems to form. Then the question is, well, what fraction of the stars actually have planets? What number of those planetary systems actually have planets that we would call habitable, where life could potentially emerge? And then from there, what fraction of those habitable worlds actually go on to have life? After that, what fraction of those living worlds become or develop some sort of intelligence? After that, what fraction of those intelligent worlds actually then develop interstellar communication techniques? Or do they, for example, could they just stay in the Middle Ages forever? And then lastly, what's the lifespan of these advanced intelligent species? Is it 5 months, 5 years, 5 million years? Take all those factors in together, and you can get a reasonable estimate of how many friends and neighbors we have in the Milky Way. Problem is, talk to 2 different scientists, you get 3 different answers for what the numbers should be plugged into there. So literally you could have anyone guessing from there are millions of advanced species in the Milky Way right now to we are unique in the entire universe. It depends on who you talk to. Now, if you talk to us, you get the right answer.
Yeah, it's a case of garbage in, garbage out, as with anything. You know, you plug garbage into this function machine, you're going to get garbage out.
Right.
So you know what this brought to mind. I know that there is a guy. I think he's an astrophysicist, and he has a YouTube channel, and he's made a point of saying, "Look, the chances that there is anything else out there at all is astonishingly low. That there were too many." He's not a theist by any means, but he's saying there were too many chance occurrences, too many coincidences, things that had to happen just so in order for us to be here. He's saying he thinks it is just us. What do you say to that?
The thing about any kind of claims to do with probability are ones to do with frequency. So it's a bit like abiogenesis. So how did life begin here? And it's vanishingly low probability. So, well, no, and you could say it's a vanishingly low probability to win a lottery. But if I buy 10 billion tickets, I'm going to win a lottery, right? So it's about the frequency of how often this happens. So, you know, whenever you talk about probability, if the universe is infinite, then you've got infinite chances of this happening, and that's going to change things entirely. If it's incredibly large still, you're still going to have a greater probability of these sort of things coming together. But anyway, Aaron will put that into much better mathematical language than me.
A big question will, of course, be what factors are they referring to, and what's the data that shows that, 1, they're infrequent, and 2, necessary for life. And also, a lot of those factors that might go into it may not even be independent of each other. So the best recent scientific way of consolidating this was in a book in the early 2000s called The Rare Earth Hypothesis. It was actually from a couple, I think an astronomer and a geologist, and putting out, here's all the features that Earth needed to have so life could actually develop. These things, as far as we could tell, are rare for other planets. And so it should actually make it that you run the numbers, we're actually very unlikely to have any neighbors elsewhere, even in the universe. Thing is, though, a lot of those factors, we don't know how necessary they are, if they go in the direction they say, or if they're independent of each other. I'll give an example. It's said by the authors that we need plate tectonics. That you need that to like churning up materials, so that way there's like stuff for life to work with. If all the good stuff, all the nice nutrients you need are just, sinking to the core of the Earth, or at least under the crust of the Earth, well, it's going to be hard to like churn up iron and get things there. And they also suggest that we needed a moon to keep our axis stable. So that way we could, have the Earth's climate not constantly shaking back and forth. Neither of these things are demonstrably true, as if what we can tell. There might be reasons to think that, but we can't show it. And also there is hypothesis that the formation of the moon caused the creation of the continents. Literally, the way we think the moon formed was a gigantic planet-sized object called Theia hit the Earth about 4.5 billion years ago, and in that collision basically smashed a big chunk of material that then coalesced into our moon. And that process, some have also been theorized, actually also broke up the crust that actually created the continents. If both events are basically causal with each other, then you can't treat the two numbers independently and just multiply them together. So I have enough reason to think we don't know enough to say what is and is not probable, especially when we just don't have enough samples to go around and say, hey, I visited 10,000 habitable worlds and only ours actually has life on it.
Right.
Stacie, are you following this?
I am.
Or please try to stay awake. Okay?
No.
To be honest, he's lost me. I mean, I'll just let him go on with the chapters that I said. Can you write these chapters? There's like maths and science involved.
So what chapters did you write?
Me, just the ones on like God and evil
theology
and stuff
part?
like that.
Yeah. That's the part that I am interested in, because I would never entertain the idea of aliens before, because I thought, God, if there wouldn't be, 1, they would have been demons, is what I thought, and 2, Jesus came to die for humanity and just us, so there was no possibility.
You're in for a treat then.
Yeah.
But by what you were saying there, though, it doesn't mean that you're not looking forward to listen to Aaron's parts.
Oh no, I've been flipping through.
All right, I'll go.
Yeah.
So so I guess where we wanted to set the first kind of third of the book out to what we wanted it to say was the hello. Is that some? Can anyone else hear that noise?
I do.
I don't know where it's
Yeah.
from.
My refrigerator popped on just now. It could be that, but I did. Who knows?
It's aliens.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do was look at what we thought was the best iteration of the Drake equation. What would be the best guesses at some of the numbers, refine what other people have done previously, and then come up with what we think is a fairly robust and justifiable answer. And I'm sure Aaron can talk to that.
What are you estimating there, Aaron?
Well, so when we go back to our friend, the Drake equation, fortunately, when Drake wrote those numbers down in 1961, he really didn't know almost any of the values, what they ought to be. And so they were kind of loose guesses. The first several terms we now actually have really good data on. So the rate of star formation, how many stars have planets, things like that. We now have extremely good and robust evidence there. The numbers when it comes to, well, what planets actually go and have life that develops intelligence, those we don't have any good empirical data for. But we also have statistical ways of treating a value that you actually don't have prior knowledge about. So we can actually model our uncertainty, and we basically put together a bit of computer modeling to just like take random samples from these probability distributions that model our uncertainty, plug them in together, see how they plot out, and we figured the following. That we are alone in the entire universe seems very unlikely. Like better than 95% confidence that we have neighbors. Do we have any neighbors in the Milky Way where they might be close enough to actually talk to? We're 50-50 on that.
Interesting.
Which
Aaron,
is,
you sound really smart. Did you go to college? Is that what happened, or?
Yeah, I went down the road and, I went to the college, but I didn't stay long enough to get one of those fancy degrees. I just figured if I drive by, that's good enough, right?
That's good enough. I'm sorry, Jonathan,
okay.
I cut you off. What were you about to say? I'm sure it was really English.
Well, just after, I'm sorry, my good PhD friend, Dr. Aaron Adair. I was going to say, so my personal opinion is that there's definitely life out there, definitely intelligent alien life out there. In fact, there could be billions of manifestations of intelligent alien life. It depends. Again, it goes back to, well, if the universe is infinite, then that's going to give you a very different number to if you think it's half that size, if you can half infinity. But if you get my point. So it will depend on the size of the universe. And so my conclusion is, yes, there's intelligent alien life out there. There could be billions of manifestations, but they are quarantined by distance, which is to say that they are so far away. And Aaron can talk about some of those numbers involved in nearest sort of galaxies and whatnot. They're so far away that we don't really have any realistic chance of communicating with them. But still, if that is the case, that still has ramifications, theologically speaking, and in terms of the existence of God. But Aaron, on to big numbers.
All right. So if we wanted to take a trip to just the nearest star system to our solar system, we would be going to Proxima Centauri. It's only 4.2 light years away, which means if you if you had a rocket ship or other spaceship that could go just about the speed of light, it would take 4.2 years to travel there, as observed by somebody on Earth. Now, we don't have those rocket ships. We're not developing them anytime soon, and the fastest things we've ever actually launched into space, the Voyager probes that have gone into deep space, would take something on the order of 70 or 80,000 years to get there.
Oh my gosh.
And they're going how fast? Just the Voyager?
I mean, they're going, I'd have to check what the numbers are, but probably something like 7 kilometers or so a second.
So, I mean, they're moving.
Oh, yeah. They're booking it. I mean, like
70 to 80,000 years.
70 to 80,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that's, of course, they don't have any ability to stop and turn around and come back. They don't have even that possibility. So even if we built the rocket ship to go that way, it would be a one-way trip, and you couldn't even stop and say, see the sights. You would just zip on through and then go on there. So we just don't have the tech to get to those worlds in any sort of reasonable time frame. I will note, though, that there is something called Project Starshot, where they are trying to actually send extremely low-mass probes and active solar sails. And if we shoot extremely powerful lasers there, we might be able to get them up to like 20% the speed of light.
Okay.
If we did that, then we're talking, a matter of a couple decades to get there rather than geological periods. But again, those are extremely tiny probes. We are not sending people anytime soon. And again, that is the closest star system. If you wanted to, I don't know, visit the other side of the galaxy, you would have to cover about 100,000 light years. So what we mentioned about going to Proxima Centauri, basically multiply that by, 30, 40,000. It would take hundreds of millions of years with our tech to do that, which is another way of saying, I don't want to get in the tube and wait that long to get to my destination. And of course, my great grandkids probably also don't want to be confined to the tube.
So
Can I just give props? Can I give props
ahead.
props to Calan M in the live chat, who said, "Learning about evolution after being terrified by it, decades of cognitive dissonance. I find life's richness fascinating." And this is that's a wonderful point there. Like not only evolution but cosmology. I think sometimes religion can really constrain you and what you think and what you believe and how you approach learning, and it stops you from being able to access some of these really big ideas, some of these awe-inspiring ideas. Like the whole theory of evolution is a wonderful mechanism that is so worthy of just getting your teeth into. And the same with cosmology and what we're talking about today. So I really
and it's also worth noting that as much as Darwin was worried about how he'd be treated after the publication of Origin of the Species, our subject matter actually had at least one person executed for beliefs about aliens.
Who was that?
Like for heresy?
In February of 1600, Giordano Bruno.
Is that actually the reason that he was executed?
Yeah, so you get a lot of modern Christian apologists who would try and deny this, but actually some more recent findings in some of the kind of, I don't know their transcripts, but some of the reasons why he was executed have shown us that actually, Aaron had talked to this.
Yeah, we actually have the records from the Inquisition that was basically scrutinizing and doing interviews with Bruno for, I think, a few years. There were multiple heresies he was accused of: denying the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus, the virgin birth, all the things that you can imagine the Catholic Church being a bit worried about. But on that list of like the 10 heresies that he was executed for, one of them was the proposition on the plurality of worlds and their inhabitants. So it was in the top 10 reasons why this person has to be burned at the stake in Rome in front of everyone.
That's interesting, because I thought that this was one of those things that even Tim O'Neill, who does that History for Atheists website, where he's always myth-busting atheists for things that they popularly believe, I thought this was one of those things that even he had suggested was false. But you're saying that we do have good evidence that is the case.
Now, I haven't read anything O'Neill might have written about this. Now, here is what is false. While it is the case that Giordano Bruno was a Copernican, he did believe in Copernicus' model of the sun instead of the earth being the center. That was not one of the things that he was being accused of and being sent to death for. So he was not being executed for being a Copernican.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Copernicanism helped actually push him in the direction of saying there is then multiple worlds, that along with Epicurean philosophy that got him to those sorts of views. So only in the most indirect way was Copernicanism even involved in his execution. Now, also it could be the case that if O'Neill is going with older sources, because there's a lot of different older historians of science would say that Bruno's death is, complicated, but we don't really know the reasons. The thing is, in the 1940s, we rediscovered in the archives of the transcripts from the Inquisition. And now we can actually see, okay, here are the reasons. And in particular, we relied on another historian of science by the name of Alberto Martinez. He wrote a peer-reviewed, article showing not only here are the reasons that Bruno was executed, but he also found 30 other examples of other theologians before 1600 all saying this is a damnable heresy, including people like Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine. So it's like, no, this was like clear church tradition. Multiple popes condemned it and said that, it's a damnable heresy. So the fact it was on the list makes sense.
Yeah, and the paper you're referring to is a 2016 Alberto Martinez paper, Giordano Bruno and the Heresy of Many Worlds in Annals of Science. But you can find online the article in Scientific American by Martinez again from 2018. Was Giordano Bruno burned at the stake for believing in exoplanets? That's a really worthwhile article.
Interesting.
Is looking at all of this.
So let me fire another question at here, and then Stacie, after that, I want you to jump in with something. It's your
Yeah.
due one, your
Yeah.
due one. But I want to ask you, what is the likelihood then, assuming that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, not just microbial stuff, but intelligent life? What's the likelihood that we'll ever make contact with them? Because to me, it seems hopeless. There's almost certainly intelligent life elsewhere, precisely because of how damn big the universe is. But at the same time, it's because of that same vastness of space that it just seems, like I said, hopeless that we'll ever get in touch with them. What do you think about that?
I think I'm being pointed at. Okay, so unless we can build the ship that I'm traveling in right now, the distance problem is something we just cannot get over. But here's a few things to think about. One is that even if, there's a couple ways that we could possibly have knowledge of those aliens. There's a more active way on the part of the extraterrestrials themselves and a more passive way. And the active way is if the aliens are actively transmitting and trying to basically send out a beacon and say, hey, we're here. And if we pick that up, of course, that would be absolutely definitive that, hey, we just picked up this radio signal. We can see, what direction it's coming from. It's loud. It's directed at us, etc. That would, be something that aliens could do in our favor to help us find them. On the other hand, we could potentially also find their technology by more passive means. So one of the things we talk about in the book is a structure to try to collect all of the energy outputted by an entire star called a Dyson sphere or Dyson swarm. If such a structure were built, it would basically be blocking out almost all the light from that star to try to absorb it for uses for other things you might want to do, whether that's building starships or making new Netflix series, whatever the aliens want to do with all that energy. But anything you do with that also gives off waste heat. That's just the second law of thermodynamics. We could also potentially look for those signatures around other stars and say, hey, this one's giving off a weird infrared signature. We can look for things like that, and we have.
Wouldn't they have to be beaming something in our general direction in order for us to hone in on our signal? And wouldn't they have to know that we are here to begin with, which is problematic because we've only been sending signals out at the speed of light for, about maybe 100 years, and that's only gone a very minuscule distance.
Well, the aliens could do actually a few things that we are very close to being able to do with our technology. We are very close now to, well, actually, in a few cases, we actually have been able to measure the contents of atmospheres of exoplanets. We can look at the light from an exoplanet and figure out what's in their atmosphere. So potentially, with further advances...
do you want to explain what an exoplanet is?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. An exoplanet is a planet that is orbiting another star. So not one of our solar system, but one of the many, many, many other stars that we can observe. And with our various techniques, we have found these exoplanets, and in a few cases, we are able to now take measurements of their atmosphere, which means we can figure out what is in the air, what anything is breathing. And that also means we could also look and say, hey, this planet is building up a lot of ozone. This, is kind of a sign for life. Hey, this planet is building up a lot of nitrogen oxide and carbon dioxide. This looks like it's going through an industrial phase. So potentially, if the aliens have even just a little bit more advanced technology than us, they could look at our world and realize ours is a living, breathing planet. And if they're within, say, 200 light years, they might be able to start see the signs of the Industrial Revolution. So they could start at least guessing which planets or star systems it's worth beaming signals to.
Okay. Stacie Grahn, jump in there.
Well, so from where I'm coming from, I'm really interested in the theology aspect of your book, and how this would really disrupt and challenge the Christian narrative. So what is your take on that? And if there, say in this lifetime we did come across aliens or extraterrestrial intelligence, how do you think Christians or theists in general would respond to that? Do you think that they would have to admit that maybe their theology or what they believe is wrong, or maybe there isn't a God?
So one of the objectives of the book was to try and work out what the discovery of intelligent alien life would have in terms of the probability of omnigod existing. So omnigod being the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God. So if we take that version, Christian omni-God being like the most prevalent one, but we do look at other religions. We have a section towards the end looking at what effect discovery would have on other religions. But the main core of the book is about Christianity because of our shared contexts and whatnot. And actually, most work has been done on astrotheology in terms of Christianity. So we looked at McIntosh and McNabb's paper that looked at 6 areas of Christianity, 6 challenges, what they thought were the 6 potential challenges that ETI discovery could throw up.
And these are Christians, right?
Yeah, and they are Christian. Yeah, so these guys were Christian philosophers, and we used that paper as a main structure for our delving into this subject. So they are challenging theism, so theism in general, belief in God in general, challenging Christian scriptures. So what does the Bible have to say? How does discovery affect how you see and interpret the Bible? Christian doctrines, so that's a theology coming out of the Bible and theology that's been evolved over millennia. Challenging Christian tradition, exacerbating the problem of evil, that's a big old chapter, that, and challenging Christian narrative. So we looked at these 6 areas and then went to town on them and broadly concluded antithetically to what McNabb and McIntosh believed, which is there was no challenge, and we said, yeah, there is challenge across all of these areas. Some of them might be larger challenges than others, but at the end of the day, if there is even a very small percentage change in the probability of only God existing, then that is interesting and worthy of note.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people would somehow, because I know, like what I said earlier, I was just told if there ever was aliens, they would just classify them as a demonic force. So I feel like they would still kind of, make excuses for it, but it would be really interesting.
Here's a pamphlet that we got hold of to have a little look at as well. It's called UFOs, Demonic Activity and Elaborate Hoaxes Meant to Deceive Mankind.
Exactly.
So you get all sorts of ways that Christians will go about trying to understand intelligent alien life. Because at the end of the day, the job of theology is to keep the Bible and God here. Like, that is the truth that cannot be challenged. So whatever data there is in the world, it has to fit that. And the whole job of theologians is to do that. So it's like, okay, if aliens do exist, right, it has to fit this context, and we can like meld stuff around. And what can I do to make it fit, rather than go, I'm not going to argue from the Bible, I'm going to just look at all the data in the universe and then argue up to a conclusion, and not have to argue towards something, but towards actually we're just going to build up. It's not going to anything, it's just building up till we reach a conclusion.
Are you talking this kind of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, right?
Yeah, there is an element of that. Yeah.
Even more so because before like the 70s, a fair bit of Christian literature would actually try to argue that the flying saucers and things like that were actually angelic or somehow related to explaining the miracles of the Bible. There was actually a book called God and the Flying Saucers in the late 1960s, and it was a theologian there who basically arguing that all the supernatural things happening in the Old and New Testaments, it was aliens, flying saucers, parting the Red Seas and things like that. So some people saying that ultimately, the aliens were angels of some sort. But once a lot of the stories of abductions started becoming darker, then there was kind of a reverse in saying, oh, these must be demonic forces. In some ways, you could also see this paralleled in the Muslim or the Islamic world, where there's also a fair bit of popularity of ancient alien stuff and UFO culture. And in that culture, a lot of them will say that the flying saucers are being flown by jinn, the genies, basically, the sorts of demons and demonic forces that exist in Muslim literature.
So I guess what we had to do in order to work towards understanding the impact in terms of Christianity, for example, is we had to do a bit of legwork in working out, okay, if aliens existed, would they be intelligent, and what that might look like. If they were intelligent alien beings, would they be moral agents? And if they are moral agents, would they be fallen like humanity? And if they're fallen like humanity, would they need salvation in the Christian context? Would they need salvation as well? So that out of all of these steps, there are loads of arguments that come out, which is, do they need salvation? Would they need the same kind of incarnated God thing going on for their salvation? Would they be fallen as well? And each time you go, well, if they are moral, if they aren't moral creatures but intelligent, and we are, and we get to fall, is that unfair on us? So it would be kind of unfair. So surely everyone needs to be moral, everyone needs to be fallen. And if we have salvation through the incarnated Jesus, and that's like the A1 method of getting salvation, then surely they should have access to the A1 method as well. And if that's incarnation through, the incarnation of Jesus, well, then they would need that kind of salvation too. So there's a kind of fairness thing that goes on.
Yeah. I was just thinking of the Nephilim. I'm wondering if maybe, do they have any kind of, do you guys touch on that in any part of your chapters? Because I could see, okay. I see the finger point again. Because I think that would be something that Christians could definitely.
To be clear, though, the reason he's pointing at me is because I actually am a Nephilim. I'm actually about 12 feet tall.
Oh, I was like, what?
I wasn't going to say it, but there it is.
Definitely
now
not
we
true.
know. Now we know.
Indeed. No. Not even with those amazing, strange English units of measure am I 12 feet.
Because those could be considered aliens. I think that I've heard that spun.
Yeah. So So what you're describing there is basically the story in Genesis 6, where the sons of God looks at the daughters of men and is like, "Yup, we want that. Go down, copulate, and then the creation of a race of giants or other beings that called the Nephilim." And the people who probably get the most attached to this aren't even Jews or Christians necessarily, at least not in the traditional sense, but the people on the History Channel on Ancient Astronauts or Ancient Aliens. That's what the show's called. That's like one of their foundational texts. That and the Book of Enoch, which also grows on that story, where the Watchers are then more details about who these angels coming down and finding women attractive. So the first problem you're going to probably go with this is, it says angels, it says, sons of God. You're going to be pretty forced in saying that now, if you read that literally, then God has to be an alien. That's already going to be a bit of a theological issue there. But probably more importantly, even if they are aliens, there is a biological and a sociological problem. First, the sociological one. The aliens and humans are different species. How is it that the aliens are coming down, looking at women, specifically human women, and be like, yes, we find this really sexually attractive? If we just look at our nearest common ancestors, non-humans, like bonobo chimps, you don't feel that sort of sexual attraction. And at least we're closely related, genetically speaking. The aliens have absolutely no genetic connection with us, so why would we have any sort of physical features that would be of interest to them, or vice versa? You have to think differently than the aliens you watch in, like, say, Avatar, where they basically just took a human, turned them blue, but they still have the sexual characteristics that indicate this is a human male, this is a human female, the things that become obvious. Like the Na'vi people, they're like, the women have wider hips that flare out. That's a human trait that men look at to be interested, for example. Why would we even think they'd have any sort of physiological similarity to this? If a giant tentacled creature comes down and looks at us, they're not going to have the same attraction to us, and we have probably not to them either. So there's already that bestiality issue basically across star systems. And secondly, if we don't have any common ancestry with them, our chances of successfully breeding are even lower than us successfully breeding with an oak tree. We at least have a common ancestor with the oak tree. We don't with the aliens, so we are even less likely for that to work.
Oh,
I can't wait for the peer-reviewed paper testing this. But anyway,
Carl Sagan actually had a name for this. It was the horny astronaut hypothesis.
Oh yeah, I think it was Michael Crichton discussed this in the novel Sphere, the anthropomorphic problem. How we're always in our science fiction. We are anthropomorphizing these aliens just like we do our gods, when there's no good reason to necessarily think they're going to be anything like us. I mean, something I want to touch on, Jonathan, you were talking a little bit about how extraterrestrial intelligence would make scrambled eggs of Christian theology. Like, I mean, you have to imagine a scenario in which, just like you were talking about, are people fallen on each and every planet? And if so, do we have to have an individual Jesus go die and atone for the sins of Klaatu on every single different planet, like it's cosmic whack-a-mole. He's just dying on, numerous planets
Whack-a-mole.
throughout the cosmos. It just makes it utterly ridiculous.
Mhm.
But of course, and this is something that you guys touch on as well, Leon Festinger, the old cognitive dissonance reduction thing. Tell me how that would play out if we did find evidence of extraterrestrial life.
So that the answer, well, if I take the last point first, and this goes to what Stacie was saying, is so there are a couple of questions, like what would be the impact on theology, and then what would be the impact on Christians? And that's two very different things, right? So the average everyday Christian, and that includes theologians, would no doubt go through the process of cognitive dissonance reduction. So cognitive dissonance is where you have, and Aaron can talk about Leon Festinger as a UFO, as someone who infiltrated a UFO cult. But just broadly speaking, cognitive dissonance reduction, cognitive dissonance is when you have a core belief and you have data that goes against that belief, and you get this disharmony in your brain, and you can't handle it, and your brain does all sorts of funky things. But almost certainly what doesn't happen, or what happens very rarely, is you get evidence against your core belief. So you contrary evidence comes along and you go, oh, look at that. Oh, and I'm going to change my core belief just to adapt to the new evidence. And you say, well, I was wrong. It turns out I was wrong. Oh, who knew? It happens very rarely. What normally happens is the contrary evidence is either rejected outright or is adapted to fit your belief system, or you attack the person who delivered that information. All these different ways of reducing the disharmony that usually makes the contrary evidence dissipate or change, and your core belief will invariably stay. But yeah, Aaron, did you want to add anything to that?
Basically, just to give the example that the way our brains work, it's almost like the Ministry of Information from the book 1984. We've always been at war with Eurasia. No, we've always been at war with Oceania. It's like it will always change the narrative so that way it always sounded consistent, and we expect a similar sort of thing happen with religion. Some great contrary evidence is going to come along, religion will change, and then said there was never a problem to begin with.
Yeah, and we think it does genuinely challenge all of those areas that we talked about earlier. But the reality on the ground is that Christians, like, as long as so I see religion as functional, right? So, and belief in God is functional. So as long as you have those needs, whatever those needs are, and God provides the answer to those needs, then, unless you're going to replace those answers in other ways, and you can do that with the secular worldview. Now we have grown to provide other solutions to our psychological needs that once God was the only answer to. But in the main, I think people will still maintain their core belief in God, and that you won't challenge it with aliens, even though it should be challenged. I think that there are challenges here, but unfortunately humans aren't always rational.
Someone once put that to me on social media. They said, gosh, Derek, if we discovered evidence of extraterrestrial life, that would just destroy Christianity, wouldn't it? And I was like, no, it would adapt. It's a chameleon. That's what they do. They evolve and they adapt to suit whatever the current scientific
So sorry, can I just Stacie?
No, go for it.
In answer to that, and actually this, and Aaron can talk to this brilliantly, but one of the core, I often say there are two issues with the Bible that make me just dismiss the Bible out of hand these days. I've got to the point where I've written books on biblical exegesis and whatnot. One of them is slavery. Is the Bible gets slavery so wrong? It's just so damn wrong. And Moses never came down from Mount Sinai and said, but here are the tablets, the God's told me what the rules are. And rule number 1 is don't do slavery. Rule number 2 is look at rule number 1. It's really bloody important, and it's in capitals, and just don't do slavery. Slavery is bad. So that never happened, right? So, and you get slavery being countenanced in the Bible, and it's such an obvious one that the rest of you can throw throw it all away because it's so wrong on that you can't use that as a moral guide at all. Okay. The other one is biblical cosmology, and it gets that so fundamentally wrong. And Aaron can talk about this in a second. But what's interesting, and this is what you were talking about, Derek, is that you can see the evolution of our cosmological understanding and theologians, after a while, having to adapt their belief to the growing knowledge of the cosmos. It didn't happen easily at some points, and people were burnt to the stake at some points for actually having a more accurate understanding of the universe. But I think understanding the evolution of our understanding of cosmology and how theologians react to that it tells us quite a lot. But Aaron, do you want to explain how wrong the Bible got it?
Yeah, though I should give a little bit of correction that slavery was condemned in the 15 commandments that Moses brought down. It's just one of the tablets broke on the way down when he was bringing down.
I bring you these 15, plop. Then.
Oh, well, that one wasn't important.
Yes, that's from the documentary by Mel Brooks. I highly recommend at least that scene from the film. Okay, so if we want to figure out how aliens are supposed to fit into the biblical universe, well, let's see what the Bible says about that. Now, if you go and read Paul's first letter to the Cylons, you'll realize I just made that book up.
I was like, I don't remember that book.
First Cylons, that's my favorite, in fact.
Yes, and of course, when he wrote to them, he signed off, and this is Paul, by your command. I'm just trying to see how many Battlestar Galactica fans are in the audience.
I knew that was a sci-fi joke, and it's just don't do it.
That was filmed where I'm from, just so you know.
Now, here's the thing, John, you should have actually known the Cylon joke coming because I talk about this in the Mormon chapter because Battlestar Galactica is derivative of the Book of Mormon.
I only read my own chapters.
I only read my own chapters.
Okay. So back to the cosmology issue. If we open up the Bible, let's start, I don't know, in the beginning. And if we go there and we see how the universe is put together, and as you see how things are fleshed out in like the book of Job, throughout the prophets, and even into the New Testament, you don't get modern cosmology. You don't get the modern ordering of the universe. Instead, you find out that Earth is basically some flat disk held up by pillars underneath, and above it is some sort of dome called the rakia, and the word itself derived from a word to hammer out metal. So literally, the sky is this giant metal dome that separates the waters from above and from below. The waters above is where rain comes from. It's basically where all of our weather is coming from. So what are the stars? The stars, according to Genesis, were placed in the firmament by God after the earth was created, so also getting the order of operations very wrong, but also just basically saying those little lights in the sky, yeah, those are just little dots put up there to help you keep track of signs and seasons, so you know when to do festivals and things like that. What are stars? Are they actually worlds you can visit? No, they're just a giant calendar put up in the giant metal sky. And if you go beyond the firmament, beyond the rakia, it's water, and then beyond that, it's the abode of God and his angels. Where is the room for aliens? There are no stars to go and visit with worlds around them. There is literally no place for extraterrestrials in that cosmology. If you hop over to the New Testament, the cosmos gets a little bit more complicated. There's now this layered heaven because Paul says he's able to go up to the third heaven, find paradise up there, and get harassed by other entities around there. This was influenced by the cosmology at the time, but still, you read the New Testament and you still basically get flat eartherism, even though they should have known better. Basically, the possibility of extraterrestrials just does not exist in that view of the universe. It's also worth noting, though, here is that the response that the theologian might give to this is inadequate. The common way of saying this is that, well, God, of course, knows how the universe actually is. He's God, after all. He's all-knowing.
Of course.
So when he communicates this to his subjects, he has to put his mission, his statements in a way that his subjects can understand. So in the same way, when I was teaching high school, I can't just write up the field equations for Einstein's general theory of relativity and expect anything to be understood. So you have to accommodate the message.
Yeah, which is interesting because this is also what the apologetic is for slavery as well. Quite often,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, they wouldn't have understood slavery's bad at the time, so it just had to be a progressive revelation, and they just weren't ready yet. It's like, do you see stuff in the ancient Near East that was contemporaneously like better, whatever.
Yeah, and this is a very common thing used in a lot of things in theology for reconciliation of science in the Bible, morality in the Bible in the Bible, because there's also like progressive revelation. I'm speaking in tongues. I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
I felt it. I felt it.
Okay, yeah. So, problem though is it has the assumption that the audience could not have understood this. They couldn't have understood the possibility of other worlds with aliens. The thing is, we know that's wrong because we have writers from antiquity who promoted the idea that yes, there are other worlds with life on them. We actually find the oldest version of this from the philosopher Epicurus. And if you know this philosopher, you probably know him as the first person to really articulate the problem of evil. So he's got that sort of thing going for him. So he's usually seen as like the arch atheist of antiquity. That he believed that because of his views of like the cosmos and atoms and things like that are just things randomly bumping around, given infinite amount of stuff and infinite amount of time, it can go through every single combination. And so there will be infinite numbers of those things as well. So there are infinite other worlds, infinite other planets with life on them. That was Epicurus's view. We actually know that from a letter he wrote to a friend that we have quotes from. Later on, we actually have aliens in the fiction written by someone in the 2nd century, Lucino Samosata, in his story, The True History. The True History has an interesting intro where he says, the only thing true about this book is that I'm lying about everything.
Nice.
But in that story, he has a ship that gets shot up to the moon because of a water spout on the Atlantic Ocean. They land on the moon, and there are people there. And the Greek sailors that got shut up there get involved in a war between the people of the moon and the people of the sun who were trying to take control of the morning star. And there was these giant spiders and cabbage head people and all these sorts of things all fighting each other. But the key thing is, it was easy to imagine there's life out beyond the Earth, and that you could, if you had the right abilities, go out and visit it. So this idea was not only existent in antiquity, it was popular enough to make stories about it. So to say that the authors of the Bible could not have included it, the audience could not have understood it, is just factually false.
And yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So it sounds to me as though this is coming as something of a shock. It sounds to me as though Christian apologists are just trying to bullshit their way out of the problem. That's
well,
you rarely see that. That's weird.
And actually, what McNabb and McIntosh talk about, and this can be applied to Aaron's claims about biblical cosmology being so erroneous, but it also applies in their context they're talking about is why is there silence about aliens in the Bible? Why does it not mention aliens if aliens do really exist, right? And so they talk a lot about deception. Is God deceiving us? So the same with biblical cosmology and getting that wrong. Why is God knows God has the accurate understanding of the cosmos. So why is the Bible as his perfect revelation not representing cosmology accurately? So is this done on purpose? Is there a kind of deception going on here where it's lying for a greater good, and then the Christian has to come up with like what that greater good could be, like we wouldn't have understood it, all that kind of rubbish. But the same with aliens. And now there are questions here like, do we need to know about aliens in the Bible? In the same way that God hasn't told us about a flower growing in a garden in Austria in the Bible. So it's like, well, I don't have to tell you about everything. And actually aliens existing isn't that important. So we talk a lot about, whether we would expect there to be a discussion about aliens in there and also, whether actually alien life is just outright incompatible with the claims of the Bible as well, and so we do have larger discussions about deception and how that could be understood. But it's interesting that McNabb and McIntosh talk about basically they justify deception for a greater good, essentially, which is you kind of consequentialism, which Christian theologians generally don't like, which is that the good comes out of the goodness as a value is obtained by the consequences to any given action. But of course, in order for that to be a moral value system, you don't actually need God. So that's why Christians generally don't like it. But yeah, so we talk a lot about deception. But then going back to the previous point, you were talking about many Jesuses or not. This is actually one of the biggest sections of the book, possibly, because this is a really core one, because this is to do with whether Jesus exists or not, or why Jesus exists, right? The whole rationale for the existence of Jesus. And interestingly, astrotheologians are split. Like there are a whole bunch of astrotheologians say there would be only one Jesus to rule them all. And there are
I think we probably should clarify what astrotheologian is, especially because, Derek, you probably deal with other people who call themselves astrotheologians from coming from like Zeitgeist and things like that. We probably want to clarify this is not the same thing.
Yeah, so basically people who do with theology to do with aliens and the cosmos and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, you have half of them say, yeah, only one Jesus. And then the other half saying, well, there's really loads of problems with having only one Jesus. There has to be a Jesus in every single, every single alien civilization. There would need to be another Jesus. So you have the billions of Jesuses versus one Jesus. And then both of those. So what happens is these guys criticize these guys and these guys criticize these guys. And we just sit off the side eating popcorn and say, we'll agree with all of that. All of that's right. It's all
so they're really going after each other.
Well, not really, but they will, in academic ways, they'll say, yeah, that's untenable because of this and blah, blah, blah.
And we just nod our heads and say, yes, it's all untenable. We agree.
Yeah, all of it's untenable. Because, the issue, so for example, one Jesus to rule them all, if you have this one instance of this story, so for us, the whole Jesus thing is what we get out of that story. It's a story to us that is speaking to us. I mean, Stacie, you can tell us more than anyone about what that meant to you and what it told you and what it taught you and that relatability. Now, there are even problems with one Jesus on earth because there's something called, and we talk about this a lot, the problem of particularity, which is it's a really particular story. It's like Jewish. There are loads of, like, that time, that place, very parochial, loads of weird things like don't mix wool with linen and don't eat shellfish and all this kind of stuff. It's very particular. How much does that speak to someone in the Amazon rainforest? Well, not a lot, actually. And that's a bit of a problem. If that's your perfect revelation, then actually it's not going to work so well with everyone in the world, right? Now multiply that across the universe, and you've got tentacle beings like going, "Oh, what? Jesus has saved us all." What? Who would, and have to think about some human, just that empathy. So it doesn't really work very well. So there's a real big problem with that, and there's lots more that can be said about that, but I don't want to go on for too long.
Yeah.
And then so they say, so we have to have one in every civilization.
I just shot the entire idea down. Like my husband would always come and tell me things about like the universe and galaxies and maybe like there's probably life out there, and I'd be like, no, I don't think there is, because Jesus died for us here on earth, and then that would mean that the Bible means nothing and there's no speaking of that. So I just would shut the entire idea down. So yeah.
There are some like theologians as well, like Aquinas and Augustine, and they had their particular like claims about there can only be one, or so on and so forth. And so there's some of these different theories have different proponents of them that are pretty big names. Aaron, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I think I should want to connect it to one other point that we made about the consequentialist ethics about deception. The consequences of how the Bible presents its cosmos and the lack of possibility of aliens led to the consequences of, like I say, the death of at least one person. So if God is keeping us deceived about this and leading us to theological conclusions that are false and leads to suffering and death, I would also say on a consequentialist ethic, God also failed badly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me of, this is nothing to do with this, so I do apologize, but it does remind me of the slaughter of the innocents, which is one of those ones that is quite a thorny issue. It doesn't really matter how many children died with Herod looking for the same age children as Jesus and going around and killing them. But the birth of Jesus was causally responsible for the death of all those innocent people. And this has been actually a big problem that some theologians have actually admitted to, that's like, yeah, this didn't need to happen. And actually, if the and you know about this, Aaron, haven't written a book on the Magi, but if the Magi hadn't gone to Jerusalem in the first place, they were warned by an angel not to go back to Jerusalem. If they'd been warned before they went to Jerusalem, then none of that would have happened. Herod would never have known. But of course, it's just complete nonsense. So anyway, that's another example about badness coming about as a direct consequence of something that God has come to make.
But you have to remember, those babies just didn't matter because they weren't really part of the story. Strangely enough, for some of the research I did for other things, I was watching an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 1980s where it's these kids that are time traveling to all the different stories in the Bible, and they go back to the birth of Jesus. And when these time traveling kids see that, Herod is sending his army there, it's like, oh no, but what about Jesus? Are they going to kill him? It's like, but don't worry. Remember in the story that Jesus gets away. It's like, oh, okay, everything's fine. It's like, what about the other babies? They don't care apparently in this cartoon. So yeah, God is cartoonishly evil in these sorts of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been interesting to me, Jonathan, how you kind of tackle criticizing theology from a philosophical standpoint, which of course is fascinating and absolutely has its place, whereas I do it from a more historical, critical approach. You know what I mean? Actually getting into the origins of many of these biblical tales and whatnot. And so it's when I hear McNabb and McIntosh try and square this circle, all I can think is, gosh, have you guys maybe considered that this old Canaanite storm god just doesn't exist? So, I mean, for me, it's as simple as that. It's like,
it's all of these things coming together. There's so many reasons: philosophical, right. Theological, as you say, historical. You can talk about archaeological. All of these things coming together. It's like, yeah, it didn't happen, right? Or it definitely didn't happen like that. But yeah, and well, talking about one of the big philosophical arguments that Aaron's sort of hinted at is the problem of evil. And this is a big old chapter that we have in there, and it actually involves quite a bit of maths as well that we use another philosopher who wrote a paper on this. But Aaron, do you want to talk about the problem of evil at all? Like, express what the problem of evil is, and maybe talk about like Ruhmkorff and how you did some maths on the back of him.
You say me did the math, but no, we worked on this together.
we did the math. Yeah.
It's a joint effort.
Yes.
I'll take that. Thanks, mate.
All right. So the problem of evil, like I said, it was like probably most famously articulated by Epicurus. And if you have Omnigod, the God that is all powerful, all knowing, and all good, and most probably is that they're all good and all powerful, then it comes the question of, hey, there's evil in the world. So if God if evil exists and God is all good, then he can't be all powerful because he would have stopped it. If God is all powerful and there's evil, then he can't be all good because he had the power to stop it and didn't. If God is all good and all powerful, whence cometh evil? That dilemma or trilemma that created there has been banging on for theologians and philosophers of religion for over 2,000 years.
Wow.
We don't think there has been an adequate response to it, so it is still an empirical, if not a logical, problem of evil. But nonetheless, the question now becomes, okay, terrible things have happened in this world that are unexpected on an all-good, all-powerful omnigod. We like using the phrase omnigod as much as possible.
Yeah, and actually, this is a really good. What we haven't mentioned, Aaron, is the Copernican principle, which Aaron will bring in a second. But
point, yes.
That's actually super important for a bunch of arguments we have in the book that we use. But before Aaron just goes on there, like if we take the principle that stubbing your toe is the biggest evil in this world, right? Imagine we all live together, and stubbing your toe is the worst thing that can happen. And then I know it's terrible. I know things are relative, but still, if even given like the power of that relativeness or relativity, it would be pretty easy to explain that away with the problem of evil. We could just say, yeah, okay, we needed that toe stubbing for X, Y, and Z. But when you start saying, right, the 2014 tsunami that killed 240,000 people, when you talk about Ebola, cancer, when you talk about genocide, when you talk about rape, when you talk about slavery, right? If you can agree that there is definitely a difference between only stubbing your toe and all that stuff, right? And that all that stuff is more difficult to explain away given omnigod. In other words, that difference affects the probability of God existing. This is super important. So you got stubbing your toe and you got all this crazy stuff. And you say all this crazy stuff can still be explained away. Like it's not impossible. It just makes it less probable, right? Mm-hmm. If you admit that, then the Copernican principle comes in and makes this even worse. So Aaron, I won't talk anymore. You go for it.
Yeah. So what we then realize, okay, whatever you would say is the probability of this gargantuan level of evil in our world is, and how consistent that is with God. If you say, like, the Holocaust, for example, that's maybe twice as likely on atheism as theism. It's like, just a 2-to-1 probability there, which to me seems fantastically inadequate for what absolute terror that was, as one example. We realize, though, if aliens exist, they also will almost certainly be suffering. And because we also realize another fundamental thing about our place in the cosmos is that it's not special. Since Copernicus basically has helped kick Earth away from the center, we've been just seeing more and more and more how we're basically just one speck in the grander universe of things. So if we are going to talk about ourselves, unless we have actual evidence otherwise, we're more likely going to be average in various measures. We're much more likely to be closer to the middle of things than on the outer edges to be exceptional. And I have a t-shirt that can actually help explain that.
Okay. I am 99.7% confident that I fall within 3 standard deviations from the mean. Is that what
Which
it
is to
says?
say-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, it's a good thing that being a nerd is sexy these days, because that's hot.
Which is to say
That's
that
awesome.
if you might, in your house, you might think I'm the tallest person in this house, right? And you
Right.
think, yeah, that is amazing. I'm really bloody tall. You go out into your village, and it turns out that actually there's a few people that are a bit taller than you in the village. And then you go out into the city, and it turns out there's quite a few more. And then you look at your country, and then you look at the world, and actually it's okay, I'm a bit more average than I thought it was. Well, that's a kind of principle where pretty much everything, our intelligence, our morality, there will be aliens out there that are far more intelligent than us, far more moral than us, far more evil than us, and have far more suffering than us. And that, sorry, Aaron.
Right.
Yeah. And so, like, my t-shirt is like actually representing what's called the normal distribution, or the bell curve, that captures that basic statistical thing, that you're going to find the vast majority of random polls, random events to be closer to that middle point than on the outer edges. So unless we have evidence otherwise, we should expect our various measures of what our intelligence is like to be somewhere close to the average, which also means that whatever evils that we have had is actually probably average for the most terrible sorts of things that have happened on other worlds. Our tsunami that killed like 250,000 people in just one fell swoop, there's almost certainly other worlds that have had even more terrible tsunamis. And so even if we know nothing about those worlds, we actually realize that the problem of evil becomes worse just by the very existence of extraterrestrials. So in the math portion, especially what we have hidden in the appendix, we go through and start off, and basically we solve a couple of differential equations. We use Bayes' theorem, step through, and come to our conclusion of how you should update the probability of God based on the problem of evil with the existence of aliens. So if you said the worst thing that's ever happened in human history was the Holocaust, and that was 50-50 on theism, that it's, twice as unlikely on theism than not theism, we can now say, all right, well, if aliens exist, now here is what your new probability needs to be. So we have a way of updating that. And conversely, if the Christian will claim no evil whatsoever will ever count as against God, we actually show mathematically that basically means, apparently super Holocaust completely consistent, the devil winning completely consistent with all good theism. I put it this way in another podcast: if an all good God allows this, then this God is good for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, we already know that a far worse catastrophes have happened elsewhere in the universe. 65 million years ago, the galactic alien warlord Xenu stacked people's bodies around volcanoes and then dropped A-bombs into them and blew them. Yes.
Fact.
L. Ron Hubbard wrote about this, and that guy was on point.
That man knew his onions. He was on something. It was on something.
Ask old Tommy Cruise. He knows. He knows. It's interesting. The problem of evil. It seems like every theologian's or apologist's response to that is some variation of God works in mysterious ways. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't say that verbatim, but it's some variation of that.
So we deal with that. We deal with that in the book quite a bit, and we talk about something called phenomenal conservatism. So one of the answers to there's lots of things to be said about skeptical theism, and it is a problem. It's exactly like like Aaron has said, actually, that you can imagine the worst thing on earth. Like, I don't know, something like this. So, Stacie, you're the last human being left on Earth, right? Your entire family and all your friends have been tortured over a 1,000-year period. Like, every human being's been tortured. It's been absolutely disgusting. The worst things have happened. The worst thing that you can possibly imagine in your head has happened, and then you are then tortured for the next, like, I don't know, 2,000 years. But it's still conceptually possible that Omni-God exists. There could be a reason why that had to happen, and as soon as you start getting to that point, you're like, oh, what's the point? It's like, if you're just going on this possibility rather than a probability. Richard Carrier called this the possibiliter ergo probabiliter fallacy, which is it's possible, therefore it's probable, therefore it happens, right? So you have this issue with the problem of evil, and skeptical theism is there could be a reason we can't know the mind of God, but one of the answers to this is something called phenomenal conservatism, which is like, well, I've got this intuition, and it seems really plausible, actually, that God wouldn't do that, and God doesn't exist in that way. And absent of a defeater, if you're not going to give me a defeater for that, then I'm justified in saying that God doesn't exist, because actually this is too problematic. So, yeah, you can say God could exist, but if you don't give me an actual defeater, that's not a defeater. That's just a possibility. You need to give me a defeater, and so that's one of the ways of answering that.
Yeah.
In fact, a fun way we actually mathematized that a bit too. I came up with, I think, a new concept that I enjoyed in the math chapter as well.
Yeah, it's called fun with maths. That's a new concept.
All right. So because a lot of the math is similar to things that come up in other physics things. So when it comes to radioactive elements, you've heard of a half-life. The amount of time it takes for like an element to half the material to decay. I came up with something called the half event. An event of such evil that half the time God would have prevented it. So to give some sort of standard is like saying, well, would God prevent this? Is like, well, he might have some sort of reason. All right, so at this level of evil, would God have a reason? It's like, if there can always be a reason, yes, but, eventually it's going to be like, 50-50 that God would have actually intervened. And I'm just basically now forcing the Christian to say, okay, how bad does it have to get for God to just have a pretty decent reason to, half the time stop this? And if they can't give an answer to that, they're just doing straight up avoidance behavior.
I always say isn't it funny how God's mysterious ways are indistinguishable from there simply being no God at all. Funny, odd that. Occam's razor. What's the simpler explanation here? That there's some convoluted, mysterious plan at work, that yada yada yada, or that there simply is no such creature. And then suddenly, if that's the answer, there is no omni-God. Suddenly there is no problem of evil. It goes away. It disadvantages.
It's amazing. The maxim shit happens is just it's pretty good, like naturalistic explanation.
Yeah.
We got some super chats.
We do. Stacie, did you have any last questions for these guys?
No. I thought some of the super chats are really good that are coming in. I better not. No, they touched on a lot of the things that I was curious about regarding just the theologies.
What's funny is we have touched on probably 10% of the theological, philosophical arguments here. I mean, they're just a
good overview.
Yes.
Here
we go. Yeah. Here we go. Zachary Lahawke, one of my favorites. If there are intelligent beings like us out there, do you think they'd likely come up with religion-like systems, or could there be beings who are purely rational and scientific about their world?
This, Aaron, you would be good. Aaron, why Aaron is a great co-author with this book is that he's a bit of a polymath, so he's got expertise in lots of areas, but he's also a massive science fiction geek, right? But what's interesting about that is that when you're looking into how we would predict behavior to be in these contexts, you do a couple of things. You look at history, because actually history can tell us stuff. So you have Christopher Columbus going to South America and the Aztecs and introducing religion there, and then the Columbian Exchange, which is like he exchanged gold from then with death and disease. And so like actually what happened is that kind of aliens, if you like, coming to that country caused all sorts of problems in a whole load of different contexts. So what can we learn from history there? What can we learn from analogies? But also what can we learn from science fiction? And science fiction is such a rich area that actually you can learn a lot, or at least I think get a pretty good grip on how people might react in these sort of situations. So sorry, that's some preamble to the great Aaron Adair.
Yeah, there's all sorts of explorations of what we can get from both our imaginations and at least a bit of human history. In fact, you reminded me as well that just the other day that, John, you decided to get a new king, and I just wanted to remind you about what happened with one of your previous princes, that he became a god in Micronesia.
Yeah,
we talked about this a bit. One of the cargo cults turned Prince Philip into the son of one of their other gods known as John From. And in this religious movement, John From, it was like a short form of John from America, that basically America was the equivalent of heaven, where they have like all the great, wonderful supplies and good cargo and things like that, and all the freedom. And they're hoping that the god Roosevelt will come and deliver that to them. This is like in the early 30s and 40s. So when they say Roosevelt, they're talking about President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so this apocalyptic messianic cult basically believing that John from America, or Tom Navy, will come bring salvation to their country, kick out all the colonizers, but also bring all the material prosperity of the West. And a later offshoot of one of these religions also then brought Prince Philip into it and actually considered him to be this wonderful and distant god that was then part of their worship for decades, until, of course, he died, 5-ish years ago? So the royal family has been, getting some interesting acolytes over the years.
But it's great. I mean, it was all on TV yesterday about some guy getting a new hat, and I didn't see it myself, but apparently it was quite well fitting.
That was in your neck of the woods, there, wasn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, sort of, maybe. I don't know. I was out watching my son play football.
Definitely your neck of the woods then. Definitely your neck of the woods.
Yeah, he lives just around the corner from Buckingham Palace, I'm sure.
Don't you all? I mean, isn't that how it is?
You're from England, don't you know, John? Yeah. Thing, mate.
Aren't your neighbors Peppa Pig?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, so we see like a vast array of different religious experience among humans, and also we realize in just the diversity of religiosity that some people are extremely religious, and we even say superstitious, that just about every sort of thing is somehow related to divine agents acting around every single corner. And conversely, there are some people, especially some on the autism spectrum, who just don't have a robust theory of mind, and they just don't even have like this God concept of this immaterial mind out there. So you have everything from almost hypertheism to non-theism. I mean, it's almost like atheists exist. And that's just within the diversity of humans. The extraterrestrials, don't have the same evolutionary history as us. They're unrelated. So our speculation, I shouldn't say speculation, our reasoning is that the aliens should be as different from us in terms of religion as at least we are from each other. There are perhaps some aliens that have really deep religious beliefs and even have like their galactic federation structured around it. I'm thinking in particular for those who play Halo, the Covenant, the various alien species there that have like this religious attachment to some old technology that built these giant halo structures, and even call them halos because of that religious connotation. And of course, conversely, there will be some aliens that are just so imbued in logic and rationality that they don't have gods, or they got rid of them. According to Worf from Star Trek, the Klingons used to have gods, but then when they became too much trouble, they killed them.
So, I mean, but again, you could learn from our own history here, or predict from our own history, which is to say that if you did a graph over, time against religiosity, we have an increasing irreligiosity, and non-religion in the world is a growing belief system, if you like, say that word with caveats. And so you could say that the longer a civilization exists, or longer a species exists, we could be rational in believing that actually is less likely to be religious. And you could imagine that some of these very long-lived alien species, in order that they are so technologically advanced to be able to, if it's one that does communicate with us, and we didn't really go into the details of that earlier in this, but but they would have to be like super amazingly technologically speaking. But that might also mean that they are very aged civilizations, and if that's the case, you could argue that they might not be religious based on our own experience.
Or they come and we see them and they descend down the platform from their flying saucer, and they're Jesuits.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the things we consider as well, is if we encounter the aliens and they are...
Witness.
Now that's a door knocker.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we also say, hey, it could be the case that actually the aliens come and then we need to convert away from atheism, because if the aliens are of a pedestrian, parochial sort of Earth religion, the chances of that happening to develop on another world is so astronomically improbable that honestly theism makes much more sense of that. So, we're talking about like the issues of Jesus having to go from world to world. But if we actually find out he did do that, well, I think we need to adjust our probability of atheism quite a bit. But even if they're not that specific, if they're super advanced in technology, because they're thousands of years ahead of us, if they come down and they say, yeah, our philosophers are also like 99% theists as well. So it's like, oh, their theology and their philosophy is also thousands of years ahead. We should at least listen to them, because their version of William Lane Craig has probably gotten a lot better than our version.
The idea of resurrection or rebirth, this is something that I get into. The earliest roots of that concept comes out of the sort of personification of the death and rebirth of crop life based on, the different seasons and so forth. So I used to toy with this sort of science fiction-y notion of discovering an extraterrestrial life out there, that their exotheology, their own religion, consisted of a god who died and was raised from the dead, and that, people would just, wow, Jesus must have come there too. But it turns out it's just because they themselves had seasons like we do, and they personified it in the same way, so that it's purely analogous and coincidental. Being imaginative.
I've had a similar kind of imagination of imagining a world where instead of a planet with seasons to generate that sort of idea, it's a planet where the dominant intelligent species doesn't sleep. So the only time they ever lay down is when they've actually died. Now, in that case, if they ever encountered another animal like a bear that hibernates, and then of course the bear hibernates and then wakes back up after whatever season, this could become their analogy for resurrection. So it doesn't become the rebirth of crops. It's just literally we are like the bear that is sleeping now but will awaken again.
Interesting.
We have a lot of fun with these sorts of imaginations.
There's always a time to talk about Arthur C. Clarke's third law, which is any technology that's sufficiently advanced will appear like magic. And as with the conquistadors with their muskets sitting on horses in South America, the Aztecs had never seen muskets, they'd never seen horses, they'd never seen metal. And so being able to fire a flash here and then someone dying over there, that was like, whoa. So you can imagine that aliens with that sufficient technology in order to be able to cross in the universe would appear like us, appear to us like gods.
Mm-hmm.
And then
honestly,
that could have
and honestly, they should be, because among the math calculations that we did, we also showed that, hey, if an alien species can actually get here with a rocket ship or other kind of spaceship at a significant fraction of the speed of light, their energy resources are so immense that they're 1,000,000 times more powerful than us, and their energy levels would be equivalent to a force of nature. So in a sense, they would be gods, because they would have like the same energy resources as thunderstorms and things like that.
Wow.
That was that led to a whole lot of discussion there, Zachary.
I think that was worth your $11.
Good one. Yes, thank you so much, Zachary. I appreciate you as always, good sir. Let's go on to
Sabra Bursevicht.
Thanks for pronouncing that name for me. Jonathan just purchased Aliens and Religion. Looking forward to another wonderful romance novel. Also, this is a horrible war in Ukraine update. but still entertaining.
So he's a great channel member, Sabra Bursovic of mine, and I really do appreciate him. And I do like 3 videos a day on the Ukraine war. And so some people, I also do I've got my theology, my philosophy channel, and I've done philosophy lives where people have thought I'm doing a Ukraine war, and they've come on, and I'm like talking about God and atheism and stuff. They're like, yeah, and they're in the live chat, they're not really listening, and they're like, yeah, but what do you think about what Zelensky said today? I'm like, what? So,
Wrong show.
anyway, yeah,
I need
wrong
to
show, man.
subscribe to that channel.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, no, go on, Jonathan.
I just want to say thanks, Sabra. Thanks for obviously supporting you guys as well, but thanks also for getting the book. And we'd be really interested in what people think about the book, because it's quite a niche book in a way, but actually, as maybe you've got from this talk, I hope you've got from this talk, but it goes in quite a lot of different directions, and you can be interested in will not realize that actually that these subjects are so, like, it touches on so many different subjects that I think readers can get a lot out of this book, and I'd be really interested to see what readers do get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Though
Just a quick moment there. I'm sharing the Amazon page on the screen there. Guys, do check this out. I've read a good portion of it myself. Since you guys were kind enough to share a copy of that before we did the show, and it is rich with information. It is mind blowing. You guys did a bang up job on this book, so
Thanks,
y'all,
and
do
a
check
lot
it
of
out.
really good testimonials too, like you were saying, from
it's got loads of great testimonials.
amazing
Really
people.
stoked with that. And that's the Kindle that's out next week. That'll be out in a few days. Or not next week, later this week. I forget. I don't even know what day it is. But the paperback is out now. So
Nice.
Yeah, Amazon is kind of screwed up and had the pages separate. But yeah, you can buy the paperback and get it starting to ship to you right now. The Kindle one, Amazon does whatever Amazon does. I will also just quickly connect this to the current Eastern European War. As far as I know, we only have one Russian in reference in our book, Kardashev. When we actually talk about this Soviet astronomer and his connection to putting alien civilizations on an energy scale.
Yes, we probably not time to go into the Kardashev scale, but actually, I know. Well, actually, you have talked about it already, which is if you can harness all the energy of an entire sun, then that is what
Type 2.
Type 2. All the energy of a planet is at type 1. Mm-hmm. And then, but the difference between those two is huge. And then you can imagine type 3, and then we're at like 0.7, but it's logarithmic. So actually, 0.7 isn't like we're almost there. There's a massive distance between us being able to harness the entire energy of our planet.
Where in the country do you reside, Aaron?
I'm in the greater Boston area.
Greater Boston area, okay. Because I was just listening to you, and I can't help but think we got to hang out sometime and just geek out together, because it would be a blast. But what were you about to say there, sir?
I was going to just put some numbers to that as well. So the difference between type 1 and type 2 is way more than a factor of 1 trillion. A type 2 civilization has much more than even 1 trillion times as much energy as a type 1, and type 1 is about 1,000 times greater than us. And to put that into perspective, when I say 1,000 times greater, that doesn't mean like we need to go and build another 1,000 coal-firing power plants. I mean, for every single electrical power plant we have in the world, you need to build 1,000 extra. So like in my hometown back in Michigan, there's a coal-firing plant near my parents' house. You'd have to build another 1,000 there, repeat that for every other power plant around the world to get to that energy level. And as you can imagine, there isn't enough coal and firewood to make that operational.
Wow.
And so the type 2 type of civilization is a sort that would have the capability of doing the kind of travel, or perhaps having the capability of doing the sort of travel we're talking about. So that's when we talk about quarantined by distance, those are the kind of constraints that are put in place.
Right.
Thanks, Sabra.
Yeah.
Sabra, yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your support. We've got Ichabod. I know who that is. That's our good buddy Brady. Shouldn't the existence of other inhabitable planets suggest to Christians that Jesus won't be returning for millennia if those worlds are meant to play into our story? Otherwise, what's their point?
It's worse than that. It's much worse than that. because there are civilizations that are nowhere near being born yet because they are going to grow around stars that haven't formed yet. There will be new civilizations for billions of years to come. If Jesus has to go and visit every single possible inhabited world throughout the entire lifetime of the universe, then yeah, if Jesus has to do that first before coming back, the sun will have burned out and the earth will be a cinder before Jesus is anywhere near done with his missions.
There's so much. I mean, as I say, one of the biggest chapters, or one of the biggest areas that we talk about, is the one Jesus versus billions of Jesus, and there's so much to say about that. So what Aaron is talking about is that if there are billions of Jesus, it's not like there are billions of Jesus like consecutively, one after the other. There are going to be civilizations where this story will need to play out at the same time, like simultaneously. There will need to be perhaps millions or billions of simultaneous Jesuses. So it's not like Jesus has to keep reincarnating here and then there and then there, but actually split himself over like cosmic geography to the tune of millions. And then how does that work? How does that work with ideas of Holy Trinity? How does that work with our theory of mind? How can you split your mind or your being or your existence into all these different kind of iterations?
Yeah, I would say that's a related but separate problem, because I think what I'm referring more to is maybe more the eschatological problem. If the expectation is for Jesus to come back and bring heaven to earth, but if he has to, of course, go to every other part of the heavens first and every single earth that will form throughout the history of the universe, and Jesus also was probably doing this before Earth, so he's already been doing this mission for millions of years, will continue to do this for billions of years, and if we have to wait for Jesus to complete all of those missions before he can, quote, come back, there will be no one here to wait for him.
Yeah, that does definitely disrupt the eschatology of Christian theology.
And it really puts the lie to the statement in Revelation, surely I come quickly. No, if the sun dies first, that ain't quick.
No, not at all. Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know where Derek went.
Derek has just disappeared just at the key time.
He has, just at
when
the key
you
time.
need him.
I suspect he's rebooting his computer.
He is.
Aaron, were there any particularly different arguments that you had in the book? I remember you came up with one quite late, saying, "Oh, this is a great argument to add."
Yeah, it was another problem with the incarnation, because if there are multiple incarnations, that is literally reincarnation.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of theologians of the past who basically argued that the idea of reincarnation, or they called like the transmission of souls from bodies to bodies, that this was also supposed to be anathema. And I find this in ancient theologians. I find this a problem in Thomas Aquinas. I even find it as something being poo-pooed by even more recent knowledgeable theologians like Paul Tillich, saying, hey, no to this reincarnation thing. But if Jesus literally has to reincarnate for every time he has to visit another world, well, there's another bit of Christian theology that just had to be thrown out. You can't say reincarnation is impossible and Jesus has done it a billion times.
Exactly.
Do you mind if I add another argument in as well that we sort of deal with? Is that all right? I don't know what you're doing for timescales and things like that, but you talk about imago Dei, which is we are made in the image of God. And then we're going to refer again to the Copernican principle again, which is to say that whatever we are, intelligence, moral, whatever, there are going to be aliens that are more so and aliens that are less so than us, right? Now, when we look at a fish, right, and we look at we're made in the image of God, we think, yeah, look at us, we're amazing. And however you define that, rationality, personhood, whatever you think the image of God is, I guess it's not super important now. And we do talk about that. But when you look at a fish, you're thinking, yeah, that's not the image of God, right? That's just a fish. Okay. But when you consider the Copernican principle that we sit in the middle there are going to be aliens out there that are more in the image of God than we are, to the tune of them being to us as we are to fish. And so when we think we're the apex, or when Christians think they're the apex of creation, that they are the one, they're the center of the universe, it's all about us. If you accept that they're the intelligent alien life out there, then there are aliens that are way, way, way more in the image of God than us.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because I think they would be made more in the image of God.
Yeah, and the possibility that some of them are unfallen, which of course is its own problem for us if we're the ones who somehow, our species mucked up and apparently we were made wrong, and God was perfectly capable of making another kind of species that was able to, not pick unforeseen fruit.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, and we get into classic, design arguments and teleological arguments. One of my favorite that we talk about in the book is the two-horn dilemma of Adam and Eve. So if you say that, and this is where we start looking at, would each civilization need a version of the Adam and Eve story? Would that be a literalistic kind of understanding of that story? Is it symbolic, so on and so forth? But you get this two-horn dilemma then gets writ large across the universe, which is okay. So imagine we took Derek and Stacie, right, and we put them in a position of Adam and Eve, right, and they managed.
I love that story.
I was waiting for something. Okay, go on.
Me and my little tea leaves, just little ones. That's all I need.
And then you guys, you choose differently to Adam and Eve, right? You actually don't make the bad decisions, right? That means that presently we're in a situation where we're being punished, if you like, on account of Adam and Eve making this wrong decision. But they're non-representative, which means that if we put Derek and Stacie in that situation, they would have made that decision. And so that's unfair. Why are we getting punished on account of just some guys that aren't representative of us? Then you get the other horn, which is, okay, if we put Derek and Stacie in that position, they will make the same decision as Adam and Eve. And in fact, if we put any humans in that same situation, they would make that same decision, right? Then that says, well, that's really shit design, because it looks like God has designed a load of people that they are by their design faults going to fail, and will have to fall, and therefore the fall is necessary, but it's actually a component of God's design, which is kind of unfair. Why are we getting punished on account of how God has designed us, right? So you get these two issues, like either God is unfair because God has chosen a non-representative sample, or God is a really crap designer, and that there is kind of no middle ground. It's just like those are your two options, and I have not seen any decent solution to that. There you go.
I like the idea of God being just a really crap designer. Just
well, the more you learn about
interior.
evolution, and you think, he is a crap designer if creationism is true.
So a couple of things to say to that. So those teleological arguments are design arguments, like Paley's watchmaker and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. This teleological arguments are really interesting, like childbirth, dying in childbirth, bad back, all these stuff that are just appendicitis. What's going on there? Yeah. This is really crap design. I just think those bad design arguments, so much scope to talk about that, and it's just absolutely it's a bit of a shocker. I was going to say something else, but I completely forgot.
It's okay.
Well, no worries, because as we know, that the real solution is that with the soul-making theodicy for this, is that basically God has just put us in the world's largest Skinner box to see what sort of reactions we're going to have, and then pick the best pigeons of us who have somehow pecked in just the right way.
And indeed, actually, I've remembered now. So thank you, Aaron. The other, like the biblical example of God's crap design is that He did design us. It all went wrong, and He went, and instead of knowing in advance that it would go wrong, and before creating, sort out that design there and then, He designed, created, and then went, oh crap, this is really rubbish, and then sent a flood to kill everyone.
Yeah,
just like he had his modeling table, didn't he? He designed everything, just realized it had all gone really wrong, and it just goes like this, throws it off the table and says, right, that was rubbish, let's start again. And you're like, hang on, that's just, you've literally killed everyone apart from 8, and all those animals you've killed, like you literally just wiped out everything and starting again, and you should have known this in advance because you've got divine foreknowledge. So I'm starting to rant. So
we get it.
Versus
we
God.
get it. Yeah.
Jonathan 1, God 0.
Yeah.
I think you'll find it's Jonathan 30. God 0. 30 arguments against the existence of God, heaven, hell, Satan, and divine design. All of those arguments are in there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for your super chat, Brady. Mr. Ichabod, guys, check out his channel. He's one of my faves. Let's
He's
see
great.
if we've got anything else. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here because I know I've had you guys on for a while, and honestly, I can't stomach your presence for a whole lot longer.
Hey.
I think, the Canadian culture, that's all they ever are is nice. They're just nice. They come right out of the birth canal nice, and they just stay that way for the rest. They die nice. Their midlife crisis is nice. Everything's nice. I don't see anything else. Is there anything else that you guys would like to, any final words from any of you?
Yeah, I like
Except
Stacie. I don't
Stacie.
like you.
Aw.
I'm the better looking one. What the hell?
Can't believe it. Just no. I'll leave it up to Aaron. Sorry, I will. I don't mean that, Derek. I love you, man.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Dr.
It's very
Adair?
hard to top such sweetness, so I guess I just need to bring this down to just pure logical analysis again.
Go for it.
No, I think
it's like Spock. Like I'm Captain Kirk and he's Spock. It's like
You guys are a great team. Honestly.
I think we team well, but
do.
I would rather not to be Spock, especially because in the original series, in many ways, if you guys are familiar with Julia Galef and some of her work on rationality, things like that, she did this really good talk about the straw Vulcan, that the rational person who just doesn't understand emotions and all the things like that is actually fundamentally not rational. So like the way Spock is depicted as being this paragon of rationalism is actually antithetical to like proper reasoning and rationality.
Is that like based on the work of Antonio Damasio and the fact that you need intuition in order to actually, so the guy that had that brain damage and he can only think rationally, like he's purely rational thinker, but he's unable to make decisions. So he goes around the supermarket and literally can't take anything because it turns out you need both forms of thinking in order to be truly rational.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically if she refers to that, though I would guess most likely. But yeah, she's been a big promoter of that sort of stuff. Now, I can't promote her book because we're supposed to be promoting our book instead, of which it has a lovely cover. I strongly recommend its contents. I have to say also in particular, it was an absolute joy working with John in producing this. He helped me become a better writer, and I think we both, going back and forth, produced a really excellent and interesting volume that touches so many areas of science, philosophy, theology, science fiction, pure mathematics. The only thing I wish that I had greater skills was in artistry, so the front cover is a combination of Jonathan putting it together and us using artificial intelligence to create it.
Yeah, so this is DALL-E,
thing.
like it's AI, like religion and cosmos, and it kind of comes out with that, which I think was quite apt. I like that. That's Aaron being a legend. I just obviously ditto Aaron's a ledge, and I absolutely love working with him, writing with him. So nice to write with someone else on a joint project, not just like putting chapters towards maybe an edited volume, but actually writing a single project together. Absolutely delightful. Oh, that's some crazy stuff going on.
Wow.
The Hall of Mirrors.
I wanted to, before we go, share again the Amazon link here, the Amazon page where your book is available. Again, I cannot recommend it enough. You touch on just a myriad of issues, as Aaron was just saying. Also, a tippling philosopher. Ooh. This is your channel here, is it not, Mr. Jonathan?
One of my two channels. So yeah, absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Thanks for showing that.
Yep, get on there, subscribe, and just take this guy for everything he's worth, and leave the rest. Don't worry about that. And then also, Miss Apostacie.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
We need some more stuff. Now, what about the channel with you and your mom, Stacie?
So it'll be on there. We are starting our podcast. I put out a video the other day and then I hid it because I didn't like it. It wasn't perfected enough. So we are working on that. It's going to be a mother-daughter deconstruction podcast because we deconverted at the same time. So
really, oh my god! Can I?
Cool.
This is a bit cheeky. Stacie, could I interview you for my channel?
Yeah, please. I'd love to.
and obviously you can give your channel a bit of a like, hey, shout about. Oh, that'd be brilliant. Anyway, sorry.
No,
Derek, I didn't
that's
mean to
totally
That
fine.
was pretty cheeky there, Jonathan. That was a little-
I was waiting for something like really cheeky. I thought you were going to start singing Stacie's mom because that's what we're going to call it.
Oh, nice.
You know
But
the song?
Postmodern Jukebox version of that is absolutely incredible. If you know Postmodern Jukebox, that's a rabbit hole you will spend weeks down. If you look at Postmodern Jukebox, it's amazing. Derek, I would love you on my channel as well, but again, you know, I don't want you to feel you left that, mate.
I've been on your channel, Jonathan. You don't remember, do you?
I'd love you on again, like properly. Yeah. We promised to do more of that, and then we never got around to it.
Then we never did. Yeah. Aaron, do you have a channel or anything like that I can promote?
I do have a YouTube channel, but it's mostly covered in cobwebs, so there's not really much activity happening there.
Well, there's
my
probably
main
more than
website-
what mine has.
My channel, though, is also probably majority physics tutorial videos. So it's not exactly the big number draw-ins, at least not in its current form.
You're going to have to sex it up a little bit. You're going to have to sex it up.
Well, when physics gets too sexy, then, you know, it starts forming black holes, and that becomes a really difficult thing to start describing.
Talk about physics with no shirt on from now on. That's what you do. That's.
I guess that'll be my way of trying to compete with Professor Dave Explains. Maybe not. But yeah, I also, you know, my main personal website is draaronadair.com. I'm on the various social medias. I can be found. I can be tracked down.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for attending this pretty stellar. Get it? You guys?
That was good. I like it.
It was out of this world, you guys.
There is
Our
no
subject matter
opposition
is
on the
of
Genius
galactic
Switch.
proportions.
Yeah.
Of galactic proportions.
Can I just say, usually he's the one that comes up with really crap puns, but you guys, that is amazing.
Oh, we could keep going. I mean, if we want to keep talking about stars, you would be aghast to find out what's there.
Oh my
Lord.
goodness.
Nice.
I've got to check out Uranus one of these days. You know, gotta do it.
Yeah, the absolute worst thing to have is Klingons around Uranus.
Yep, it can just keep going and
We've
going.
got to end the show.
You know
this
what?
has got to stop.
My
Talk about the problem of evil.
grandmother's watching this.
Hi, Granny. Hey there, Granny Pearce.
She died decades ago. Sorry.
She'll be back.
Wait, you're saying my jokes were that bad it actually caused a time paradox?
Oof.
Now, there's the problem of evil.
Thanks so much for being here, guys. We have, I think, later this week, this coming Wednesday, my friend Shane Omgren will be with me. He wrote the Trumpland Diaries and Conspiracy Christianity. Really great stuff. So be there for that Wednesday. And until next time, this has been Theological, where religion is fascinating and stupid.
Yay.
Isn't that right, guys?
Yes.
Love it.
Love it.